You are listening to Know You're Crazy. My name is Denee. We all have crazy. What separates us is how we choose to deal with it. I'm going to be delivering engaging and actionable tools to own your crazy, treat your crazy, and turn it into your own superpower. I hope that you walk away from this show feeling the power and strength within you. And never forget to enjoy your journey because you are worth it. Your Crazy Talk Show. My name is Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. Today, I kind of got geeked out a little bit as I was preparing for today's show. Every now and then, there's a concept or a psychological perspective that I just get all excited to learn about because it resonates so deeply with myself. Today's show is all about assumptions. I'm going to key in on assumptions within your relationships. Did you know that the longer you know a person, the more assumptions you will have about them? What happens if you don't like them? What bag of assumptions are you carrying into that relationship when that happens? Would it be fair to say that perhaps you are stuck in an endless loop of assumptions about them, and maybe you haven't been giving them a fair perspective because you think your perspective or your assumption, I don't even know if you think it, likely you feel it. It's a pre-feeling about another individual. The thinking about them or the opinion about them has become so ingrained within you, and I can speak from my own perspective. For me, it's become so ingrained within me that it's on autopilot. How many of your relationships are on autopilot because you have fallen suspect to assumptions? The challenge is learning how to become positive assumption. Let me rephrase that. The challenge is understanding how can I come from more positive assumptions versus negative assumptions. Oh, we are judgmental people. When we don't like something or something doesn't sit according to our plan, we can get all crunchy about it. And then it forms an assumption. Yet we will continue to show up in those relationships day in and day out as if we're giving something to that relationship. But energetically, we are carrying around a bag of negative assumptions against somebody. Just think right now. Because a lot of the people that you might be carrying assumptions about live under your roof. They work next to you. They might be 2 cubicles over. They might be the one signing your paycheck. They might be the one you're sleeping next to at night. They might be the one that you are raising, your children. It's interesting how long we can go in a relationship and not be aware of what the negative energy is that we are presenting to that relationship because we have formed long-standing opinions about somebody else. And we will say that we love these people. We have chosen them to spend the majority of our hours with. Yet we be walking in the room with a bag of assumptions about them, just waiting for them to screw up. Just waiting for him to not pick up that cereal bowl. Just waiting for him to not close the garage door, right? Like we are assuming a lot of the time. What a powerful thing to think about. Because I'm all about emotional growth, emotional elevation. Let's get down to the dirty for a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a little bit of personal accountability and inventory so that we can escalate ourselves emotionally. Because I'm so excited about this show because as I go forward in the show, I'm going to be talking about how we turn this around. Where do we begin so that we can change how we are looking at someone in our life? If you're watching the show right now or you're listening to the show right now, you likely already have a few people coming to mind for you that you are guilty of assuming. Yeah, I know you do. What is an assumption? Let's just jump right in. I'm going to jump right in. So what is an assumption? An assumption is a belief that we hold to be true often regardless of the facts. And they start to cause problems in our life when we believe that giving they provide problems in our lives when we assume negatively against somebody for such a length of time that that assumption then grows into a hard rock conflict. That's when assumptions have gotten in the way. When you think of a positive assumption, why do you get excited to go on a vacation? What is the positive assumption that is supporting that vacation? The thought of that vacation. The positive assumption is I'm going to have a fantastic time on my vacation. Vacations are fun. They're meant to play. We get all excited. You know, planning a vacation can be fun, checking out where you're going to go. We assume we're going to have a good time. Wouldn't it make sense that when the vacation doesn't go as planned, we come home and we are highly disappointed? Or have you come home from a vacation to return to work and realize that the turbulence in returning to work is a little bumpy because the assumption is I'm no longer having fun? That's the difference between a positive assumption. I'm excited, I'm ready to go, it's ingrained in you. And why is it a positive assumption? Why is going on a summer vacation a positive assumption? Because you have a belief. There's a belief and a credit, per se, that you're giving to the idea of a vacation. When we are looking for quality relationships in our life, we want more enjoying conversations. We want to be heard more. We want to be considered more. Maybe we want to give back more to a relationship. We first have to get honest with ourselves and take a look at, what am I truly acknowledging or assuming about this person every day of my life? What's really going on there? The negative assumptions separate us. Negative assumptions separate us in our relationships. Positive assumptions within a relationship will unite us. They will align us. Negative assumptions separate us. Positive assumptions align us. Negative assumptions are more or less a self-deception of what we think is true about a particular person or a situation or even an idea. When I first read about the definition of assumptions, I said assumptions are beliefs that we hold to be true regardless of the facts. Regardless of the facts. Once we hold tight to an idea or to an opinion, we're kind of like, I vision a dog wrestling with a bone. Like, we don't want to let go. Because if we let go of our perception or our judgment or our position on something, where does that leave us? It might leave us feeling vulnerable. It might leave us feeling wrong. We are threatened all of a sudden with the idea of a new perception. What happens in our brain when we are threatened? We go into fight or flight mode, don't we? That is something that we want to avoid at all cost. You know, physiologically, we are prone to hang on to our assumptions because dopamine rewards us with certain behaviors or certain ways of feeling stronger or entitled. If I have an assumption with somebody and I think I'm right about that assumption, it doesn't have to be a positive assumption there, because the dopamine hit, the response physiologically is going to come from the righteousness and the rightness of being right in that opinion. And so therefore, I'm being fed in some of my assumptions. If I'm going to tell my brain or tell my body, hey, we're going to shift gears here and we're going to look at something with a new set of eyes, all of a sudden I've got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And how ingrained is that feeling in us? We don't like it. We want to repel from uncomfortableness. We don't want to get into uncomfortableness. So we feel it's safer to go ahead and keep assuming instead of challenging what's at the root of our relationships. Negative assumptions are at the root of a sickened relationship. If you have a relationship in your life right now that is not working to your benefit, if you find that you are complaining about the relationship, it's not the best thing for you, it doesn't give back to you, it's a struggle for you, I guarantee you when you are about to be around that individual, that there is a story that's going on between your ears, a story full of assumptions that you are making that is inhibiting the growth of that relationship for you. If you've been watching this show for a while, you already know I'm not letting you off the hook. This isn't about the other person. I don't care how far down the road somebody has gone. Ultimately, we are all responsible for our own emotional elevation. It doesn't mean that we tolerate intolerant behaviors in others. It doesn't mean that we show up for abuse. But when we have relationships in our life that we continue to show up for, and we are also bitching about those relationships and we're complaining about those relationships, I would challenge you, if that's going on for you, to take a look at what your autopilot assumptions are about that individual in your life. What is it that you continue to show up and believe about that individual that's keeping you from having a flourishing experience within that relationship? And I know we've all got people, you know, those people, they just don't do it right. They're irritating. You don't like it on certain topics with them. You won't even walk in the room with them. We make up stories and all of a sudden we're in panic mode about some things. We make it big and scary sometimes. I know we've got those people. We've got those people that we just want to, hurt. And thank God we don't. But the point is, if that's going on in your life and it's on a regular basis, and by regular basis, this person's just in your life, they don't ever really exit the life. It's not like you've moved on or you never talk to them again. It might be a weekly occurrence. It might be a monthly occurrence. I don't know. But they keep sticking around. And every time they stick around, you face a challenge in inviting them into your experience. Like you face a challenge with that. You dread it, but you show up anyways. You question it, but you show up anyways. You judge the heck out of them, but you show up anyways. That's what today's show is going to be all about. How do we spot the assumptions? What type of exercises can we do to get to the root of the assumptions? What physiologically is going on within us? I've already shared a couple things around that as far as what's going on in our brain and why we might attach to it, but I'm going to explore a little bit more with you on that topic today. If you want promising, flourishing relationships, you got to change it up. You got to change it up. If that person's going to stick around, if you're going to stick around with that person, you got to change up what the beliefs are. And when the beliefs get challenged, we kind of it's like the beliefs are going to get hit because the assumptions are kind of like the first layer. We talk about layers of the onion. Well, uncomfortableness might be the first layer in this equation today. I feel uncomfortable. Okay. And I'm going to get into feelings and assumptions. And by feeling uncomfortable, I realize that I've got some assumptions that I'm making. That's the next question, right? And then we're going to get into, what do I do about it? What do I do about it? Hey, if you are looking for some work in personal relationships, you're looking to grow your relationships, heck, maybe you're looking to bring in some new exciting relationships, and stay tuned for the rest of the show. I'm going to take a quick break. And when I come back, I'm going to continue this conversation and hopefully help some folks in the audience today. If you're looking for coaching, I am available. You can reach out at my website at susandenee.com or any of my social media outlets. I'm sure you'll find a way to contact me. More than happy to talk to you about this. And one of the sessions in my emotional elevation coaching program is assumptions. So one-on-one work around that with individuals. I see tremendous transformations take place when we're working it. All right, be back shortly. Crazy Talk Show. My name is Susan Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. And today it's all about assumptions. How many assumptions are you making about all those people in your life that aren't doing it the way you're supposed to do it? Is your crazy on fire with assumptions? Are you walking in the room with assumptions? Are you dreading the board meeting today because you got assumptions about the personalities in the room? That's what I'm talking about today. Assumptions are beliefs that we hold against other people, places, things, ideas, institutions. Think about the cable company, regardless of the facts. Somewhere along the line, there has been an experience. There has been some justified anger, maybe some justified frustration. And we are so stubborn that we kind of lock that emotion in, that feeling into our head, and that in our body, it goes through us, and we attach a judgment and we attach a criticism. And then we hold them to that for a long time, unless either a new experience comes in that changes the belief, breaks the pattern of crazy around that, right? Something new has to come in, or something intrinsically happens for you. You go through an internal shift of growth. We all have them. They come at different times in our life based on different circumstances, where we completely upheave all these old beliefs and we realize that ain't working no more. If the term rock bottom resonates with you, that's one of the times when that will happen for somebody. A disastrous divorce might wake somebody up. Tragedy might wake somebody up. Isn't it kind of unfortunate, though, that the majority of us sometimes have to go to extreme situations in order to wake the hell up about what's not working in our life? My effort with this show is to help provide insight to you so that you can better understand you're crazy ahead of time, apply some tools, learn how to identify it, learn how to put some tools on there to allow you to have flourishing relationships without having to burn the house down. That's what this is about. Today, the concept, the understanding, the physiology behind assumptions and what we do with them with the relationships in our life, I find truly fascinating. I find it so fascinating that it's one of the sessions in my coaching, emotional elevation coaching program that I offer, because the transformations behind getting to the root of the assumptions absolutely elevate the relationships in our life. That's why I find this just fantastic information for you to be part of today. Let's talk about those relationships a little bit. You probably got at least one or two kind of stuck in the ones you assume. And usually you're thinking of the ones that it's not a positive assumption. And I'm going for, I am. I'm going to focus a little bit on the negative assumptions, because if you're going to find, what do we want in life? What do we want? We want more joy. We want more satisfaction. We want more love. We want more excitement. Don't you want more of that? We want like all these lovey-dovey, juicy, good stuff that makes us feel good. Well, you got a lot of that already. But then there's the other stuff, the stuff that we complain about. Maybe we call it depression. Maybe it is depression. Maybe we call it anxiety. Maybe it's, we talk about our trauma all the time. Like there's this other bucket. And that bucket is the one that I like to work on, because that bucket is where the most movement can be made for us so that we can elevate to get all that good stuff, right? But the only way we clean out the bucket and dump the bucket out of all the crap in there is we have to get in there and take a look at it. And so today in the bucket of crap is assumptions. All right. So where do they come from? Well, let me ask you, where is the influence in your life coming from? Who or what highly influences you? Because we all know who influences us, and like we listen to, it resonates with us, or they themselves, based on their definition in our life, the role that they play in our life means a lot to us. Therefore, we attach a belief system to that or to them, right? So maybe the belief system is to the identity that they present in our life. Let me break it down. A boss will have a different impact on you than, say, your wife, your husband, your intimate partner, right? Your children will have a different impact on you, a different influence on you than, say, the neighbor. So the child will have influence on you over the neighbor, right? So when you think about who influences me in my life, who do I focus on? Who do I pay attention to? Who, when they talk, do I listen And then consider, do I not like this? I recently did I can't remember if I said this on last week's show, but I recently did a half-day seminar. And I was talking about how when somebody is teaching us something that I may have not talked about this, but we check in and we check out like every 7 to 12 seconds. If I'm talking to you for 1 hour, every 7 to 12 seconds, you check out of what I'm saying to go inward to decide what you think about that. This is how we grow. This is how we change our opinions. We have to take the outside information, digest it, because what are we digesting all that information with? We are digesting all of that information with our own experience, our own perceptions, our past, right? Like that's what we're doing. We do this every 7 to 12 seconds when someone's talking. Just on this show alone, we've been going for about 24 minutes or so. Imagine I can't do the math in my head. I'm not that great with math, but it's a lot. It's a lot. You've already checked in and out and compared what I'm saying to you to decide, do I want to keep listening? Does it resonate with me? Did that make sense to me? And then you'll think about somebody. And so you're constantly regurgitating the information. It'd be kind of like I'm putting the output, you're taking the input, you're comparing, you're deciding, and you're tossing it back out and then saying, okay, if you're still listening to me, then something is resonating with you. Who influences you like that? Whose information are you staying tuned into long enough to do that inside comparison? Your boss, and there's different reasons why you might allow these people to influence you. At the end of that thought, though, the people who influence you the most, let me just remind you, you have chosen them to be in your life. You have chosen them. Everyone in your life, you have chosen. You have made a conscious decision to allow those individuals to influence you. So in the beginning, wouldn't you say it's safe to assume that you had nothing but positive assumptions about those individuals? Unless maybe somebody planted a seed in your ear saying, oh, you're going to work with, Bob, and Bob's horrible. He stinks. He eats with his mouth open. Like, you're going to really not like Bob. And then you might walk into the Bob relationship and have a bad assumption right out of the gate. But that's kind of, somebody else feeding you, yeah. But if it's just you, if you're just making a decision, which company do I want to work for? You do an interview. Likely it's been a positive experience because you decide to go work for them. You go out on that first date with your honey. Oh, the pink cloud moment, right? Everything's sweet. Everything's going fantastic. You have a positive assumption that this is fantastic. See, it takes a while. It takes a while for events to impact us within our relationships to where that regurgitate, that processing, where something comes in and we're like, oh, we don't like that. Oh yeah, we don't like that. And so now when we don't like something, what happens? We feel not so hot, right? That joy feeling, the satisfaction feeling, the newness feeling, the positivity feeling, that goes right out the door. All of a sudden you're in a relationship and the date goes bad and they make you pay for the dinner or something. And all of a sudden the feeling on the inside is, ooh, what happens if we get married and all of a sudden he won't pay for my meals anymore? Or ooh, she did that thing. And what happens if we stay in this relationship? Is she always going to be controlling like that? Like all of a sudden the fear starts setting in. And so the person that we trusted, that we were allowing to influence us, has now become human. Yeah, human. And we get a choice to make in that. Are we going to continue to show up, or are we going to exit completely? As I started the first segment of this show, I said the assumptions, the negative assumptions that I'm going to be talking about today are the relationships, and what I want you to think about are the relationships in your life that don't feel good. Okay, those are the ones because you have decided that even though they don't feel good, you're still showing up. There's some reason you're showing up, and you might be like, well, yeah, I got to show up. I got a paycheck. Well, I don't want to hear that. You're still choosing consciously to show up. So we're going to put the responsibility on each one of us for the negative perspectives or the relationships that don't feel 100% good to us. We're going to put the responsibility on us and say, okay, what's going on? So who influences you? Mom, dad, kids, social media, politics, the news, a movie, a song, right? I mean, think about all these different things, all these areas of influence that come in that can affect how we perceive something. And when you're looking at the relationships in your life, assumptions have to be brought to the surface. Let's talk about the long-term relationship, whoever that is. For many of us, it's good old mom and dad, right? Whether they were absent or present, we have got some opinions about them. I was talking to one of my clients this week, and she had all these, in fact, I'm going to do a show on self-identifiers, but she had all these things coming up, and it was always, I'm this way because of this person. I'm this way because I was raised this way. I'm this way. And she's a grown adult. I joked with her and I said, I'm going to give you permission to be your way because you choose to be your way. We'll just take all that blame off those other individuals. We'll just let you own it. Because the last time I looked, the people who we kind of blame for the negativity in our life, they're not really there anymore for some of us. So who influences you? Who are the assumptions about, right? And we're going to get to the root of the assumptions, because the assumptions need to be brought to the surface if we want to see that the relationships are going to completely rehabilitate and rebuild. Even if the person is no longer with us, but we hold scorn in our heart against them, we hold hatred against them, we hold really serious judgment against them. We're even going to talk about them, because ultimately the freedom from within and the freedom of peace is going to come from a new perspective of way of looking at that situation, instead of assuming that you're going to feel bad when you think of that person. You see where I'm going with this? That's how assumptions come back into that whole circle. All right. If they're occupying space between the ears, that relationship is still in your life. I'm going to say that one more time. If they are occupying, I'm trying to think of the right word. I'll just say space again. Occupancy. They're taking up occupancy in your thoughts. They are taking up occupancy within your relationships. Then they're taking up occupancy between your ears, in your thoughts. Then you are still in a relationship with them. Okay? Which means that you have gone to the point of assuming you're going to feel negatively every time you think of that person, if they're making your list here when I tell you to think about the ones who you really want to work on. All right, so where am I at? Before I jump too much further into this. Oh, I've got time. Okay. So what does the assumption, if you're joining me right now, I just want you to pause for a moment. And I want you to think of the person, the place, or the situation. If you're drawing a blank and you can't think of any, I'll just give you one, the cable company. Haven't we all been somewhat negative and assumed we're going to experience horrible customer service with the cable company? I mean, how about customer service post-COVID, right? That's a whole other show in and of itself. I was talking with some friends about that recently. Oh my goodness, between the customer feeling entitled to different things and the businesses sometimes being short-staffed, or you got different generations, working differently within offices. I mean, customer service, right? So there is an assumption. So if you need some material to look at, let's talk about the cable company. What does an assumption as a habit feel like? If your negative assumption, I'm going to go with the cable company, every time you think of the cable company, you might have I don't want to call the cable company. It might make you feel overwhelmed. It might make you feel just completely like, I don't want to do this. That there's just no way I can do this. That feeling is a habit. That assumption has become a habit. Because when you entertain that particular business, okay, you assume a feeling. You assume a feeling. Think about the individual in your life that you're having a hard time assuming anything positive about them. Maybe their glaring behaviors come across so negative that you are unable to see the good. In fact, you have become so, when that internal voice came in and you were comparing their actions and they're influencing you and you're taking that in and you're saying, oh, how do I feel about that? Their behavior is so obnoxious that you're asking yourself, how could I even stay around this person? How could I even do that? But yet you continue. So every time you're around that individual, you have an assumption that it's going to feel bad, and therein lies the habit. And it becomes a habit when you are unable to give the other individual benefit of the doubt. If I was working with you in a spiritual capacity, let's say you were a coaching client of mine and we talk spirituality. Some clients do, some clients don't. It just depends on the beliefs behind spirituality and all that good stuff. But let's say you're somebody who practices spirituality. In the world of recovery from addiction and alcoholism, one of the things that we advocate is a HP, higher power, because we don't like to put a lot of definitions on it in the rooms of recovery. Now, outside the rooms of recovery, you can define away all you want, but inside the rooms, we keep it very neutral as far as the beliefs around HP, higher power, because there's a lot of definitions that can come and a lot of bias that can come with the word God, right? But let's talk about spirituality. I say universe. That's what I like. I believe the universe is loving. I believe the universe is all-encompassing. I believe that the universe is out for my well-being. I don't believe the universe is trying to set me up for failure. I believe that absolutely every situation that comes into my existence is for my benefit. How I choose to perceive that is up to me, but I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe that everything is there for my benefit. If I have a relationship in my life that has been challenging me, and I am unable to access how the universe may look at that person, I can only look at that person with negativity, judgment. I feel fear when I'm around them. It's my go-to. It's my go-to. I am unable, and I am going to use the God word here just to make a point, because you'll understand it once I say it. I am unable to see that individual as God would see that individual. I only see that individual through my own disruptive perception. That's a problem. That's an assumption that's become a habit. Yeah, lots of layers to the onion, but that's the crux of what I'm getting at right now. That's an assumption habit. I continue to invite this person in, and I have a real challenging time assuming anything really that feels good about them. Logically, I can say X, Y, and Z. Logically, I know that maybe they do volunteer work, or maybe they feed the cats in the morning. I don't know. But logically, I could, make a checklist, and I could go off a couple things and be like, yeah, I know they're a good person, but on the inside, emotionally, I'm not feeling it. That's where the assumption habits come into play. So the assumption habit, the assumption piece of it, remember, we identify the uncomfortable feeling. That was the first thing I said. And then now that we know that we've got an uncomfortable feeling around that person, we're going to go ahead and look at the assumptions. What am I assuming about this person? And the assumption that you're making about that person, place, situation, cable company or whatever, is directly related. When it's negative, it's going to be directly related to a negative feeling that you have. See, we train our body into our assumption habits. We train our body. Our body's going to negatively respond. Yeah, and you know what it's like when you're around somebody that you don't want to be around. Does your heart ever beat fast? Do you find yourself maybe stuttering on words, or shutting down is a word that I hear used a lot, like, oh, I just shut down. Like, physiologically, we will react to negative assumptions in somebody else when they've gone to that level with us. So that's an assumption habit. It's when we think about it, we feel bad about it. And then we're done even thinking about it. We just automatically feel about it. I always like to say sometimes it's gone past the thinking, because now it's all about the feeling. Now I'm going to challenge you. You're thinking about that person. Maybe you're thinking about that cable company. You're thinking about which ones do do you think, now let's say it's a person. Do you think that person would agree with you on the assumption that you're making about them? Hell no. No, they're not going to agree with you. What makes you think they're going to agree with you? It's interesting to me the impact that we will have under our own roof with our family. My poor husband, he gets used as the guinea pig. I always check with him in case anybody's wondering. I'll be like, I'm going to talk about this, or we've had previous discussions where I make sure he's okay with what I talk about. But this one was a good one. So it's probably early evening. We are in the bedroom, kind of, brushing our teeth, kind of, you get home from work, you're doing whatever you're doing, and we're engaged in some conversation. I couldn't tell you today what the conversation is or was. If I could, I would. I honestly don't remember. But is it the words you remember, or is it the feelings that you remember? Because I could tell you how I felt at that time. We were engaged in a conflict of some sort. He was probably assuming about me, and I was definitely assuming about him. In fact, I was assuming about him so much that I do remember this one. He said, Susan, you need to quit thinking you know what I'm thinking. And as he said that, I took it in and I processed, not knowing at the time that's what I was doing, by the way, but that's what was going on. Researchers have proven that. That's what we do. And I thought, but I'm right. I do know what he's thinking. I literally thought that. Now, thinking it is one thing, but I went ahead and said it. I actually admitted that I was thinking I absolutely knew what he was thinking. What's the name of my show? Know You're Crazy? What do you think? Why do you think I'm so comfortable with that? Because my ass has been crazy many times. So I say to him, oh, I think I do know, or I don't think you know what you mean when you say that. I don't think you've thought that all the way through. And so here we are engaged, right? You talk about assuming. I'm assuming all over the place. I'm assuming I think I know what he's thinking. I'm assuming I think I know what's behind his words. Talk about a relationship breakdown of communication fueled by frustration. I couldn't even tell you what the topic was right now, but we were both heated about it. And the good news is we did have enough in the toolbox at that point to understand I wasn't talking about assumptions back then, but we did have the tool that I've shared in this show that comes from the Rooms of Recovery, HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired means shut the hell up, walk away. We did have that tool, and I had to apply it. He's had to apply it a few times, but I do remember, I think that time I had to apply it and I had to shut up because I knew what I was saying. I mean, you hear the words come out and you're like, oh, wow, that didn't come out quite. Oh, did I just say that out loud? I just put that out in the universe and they heard that, and whoo, there's some cleanup there. But that's an assumption gone bad, real bad. But the good news is they are recoverable. Once we decide to be honest with ourselves, the assumptions that we make about somebody that we continue to have in our lives are absolutely, the negative assumptions are recoverable. And we can come to a place where we see them in a sweet and loving way, the same way I would envision my higher power would view them. We can come all the way through. First is identifying that you've got a bad feeling about it. Next is kind of looking, what am I assuming about that person? When that person walks in the room, what am I absolutely assuming? Am I assuming that they're going to be a handful? Am I assuming that they're going to cut me off mid-sentence? Am I assuming that they're never going to shut up during the meeting? Am I assuming that they're going to ask me for something? Am I assuming that they're going to be grouchy the minute they walk through the door? When I was preparing for the show, I even put down animals. A lot of us have pets. Are we assuming their behavior is going to be a certain way, and then we're trying to correct the behavior and we're a hot mess? I mean, talk about lack of control if you have animals, but I think that's a really good test to somebody about their emotional welfare, is where they are at and even parenting their animals, right? So first we got to identify, then we're going to take a look at the assumptions, and we're going to try to understand, what are the detailed assumptions for you? A couple clues about where you might be assuming gone bad. You might things like this, I assume they're going to walk through the door, and then this is the way I'm going to feel about that. Remember the thinking and the feeling? I assume that they're going to ask me for money, But then I immediately associate a feeling with that. And the feeling piece is the second part of that. So the assumption comes and the feeling follows. So if you think I'm walking into an office meeting and I assume that this, I'm going to say manager person, maybe you've got an eager person, employee that always likes to talk in the meeting. I don't know. I'm just using an example I think most people might relate to. But I assume that so-and-so is going to take up the majority of the meeting with their opinion. The reason that feels bad is because when they do that, I feel impatient. Impatience doesn't feel good. I don't like it. So I attach to the negative assumption, because when I attach to the negative assumption, I find some sense of self-righteousness, some type of, frustration feels better than sadness. So I attach to this feeling, and now I just kind of hang on tight to that assumption. One of the things that I had read some researchers had come up with was because the brain and the way the brain is wired, and because there's like, God, what did I read? I'm probably going to hammer this stat. Like 10 billion neuron processes going on. And so the brain is trained or instinctually efficient. The brain is constantly, it's running a show up there, and it's efficient. So there's a perspective that the reason that we assume is because it's a shortcut to how we truly want to perceive a situation or an individual or something like that. So if we perceive them with a shortcut, we don't have to think and work on it so much. All right. Okay, when I come back, I'm going to take a break. And when I come back, I am going to be sharing on, now that I've showed you how to do it, you've identified, you've recognized the feeling, you got your person in line. Okay, we got like 3, I think I've covered like 3 or 4 steps. I'll go over them again on the last segment. Now, what do we do? How do we actually effectively make the change? And hopefully I'll be able to cover that in about 10 minutes when I come back from break. So if you're looking for a coach, if you're wanting to dive into some assumptions one-on-one, as you can tell, I could talk about this topic longer than an hour. And when working with an individual one-on-one, we get to take a look at all those individuals that you want to talk about. And I get to give some feedback and some perspective and take you through different exercises, whether it's assumptions, whether it's accomplishments, whatever it is. But those are some of the sessions involved in emotional elevation coaching. If that interests you, you can always reach out to me at susandenee.com. There's a questionnaire that you can take on there to find out where you fit in that, or simply email me and I'd be more than happy to schedule a strategy session. All right, having said that, I will be back shortly and I will wrap this up for you. Be back. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know You're Crazy show. My name is Susan Denee and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. And today I am geeking out about assumptions in relationships specifically, but you could have assumptions about businesses, I was talking about customer service, the cable company, that might resonate with you a little bit. Like we have some assumptions that are with principles and ideas and all that good stuff. But I'm really focusing in on the assumptions that we have in our relationships, because let's admit it, the people in our lives, we hope they're bringing value and positivity and love to us. We are responsible for generating that within the relationship. I just thought of, I think it's Brendan Bouchard talks about, we generate energy. We also have to generate positivity within our relationship. So if we're walking in predetermined that this individual is not good for us for whatever reason, or we're emotionally being affected by that, we get to take a look at where those assumptions and all those feelings are coming from. So that's what I like to work with people on a one-on-one basis. I like to work on that stuff. Like, let's take a look at it. There's no need to be scared of it. Do you want all that life has to offer? I'm not interested in going like super deep and ugly with folks. I'm just simply saying, let's bring it to the surface, talk about it a little bit and see how it's impacting you so that you can turn that stuff around. So assumptions are highly, they're just like ingrained in us. Hopefully you've got more positive assumptions than you do negative assumptions. But how can you tell an assumption is present? I went over a couple things in the last segment, but I'm going to add a few more before I get into some of the solutions that we get to have around this. Here's an assumption, that my perspective is the common sense perspective. That might be an assumption that you're under. Another assumption is that everyone agrees on what right is and on what wrong is. Doesn't everybody look at it that way? Aggressiveness has no place in communication. Are you sure about that? I'm just saying. Have you ever heard of spiritual aggressiveness? Another assumption, I am quote unquote loyal, or I am quote unquote brutally honest, or I am an analytical person. Like there's assumptions that we make about ourselves, and then we attach to that. Sometimes the assumptions and beliefs that we have about ourselves is what's withholding us from quality relationships. The way I feel about something must be the way they feel about it. Assuming other people are going to feel this way. Are you an advice giver? Are you somebody who's always telling other people how to live? My 18-year-old about handed me my you-know-what the other day because I was on autopilot thinking I'm just having a conversation. Well, she took it like I was trying to tell her what to do. And afterwards I got to reflect, and I thought, well, it is kind of different. A person in their late 40s might be communicating different than an 18-year-old. And I can see how she would have thought that. But in that moment, I was assuming, wouldn't everybody have this conversation? Like I wasn't planning on, I didn't think I was giving advice, or I was just probably talking about assumptions for all I know. But so sometimes we assume the other person's automatically going to understand the perspective that we're coming from, or they're on the same page. And remember, we're all coming from a different background, different life experiences, different influences. Here's another one. Assuming that the way I remember an event is the way you remember an event. We were both at the event, right? Assuming that we're all remembering the same thing. We were joking the other day because my husband and I, when we got married, we had 5 children. And I think the youngest at the time was 5, all the way up to maybe 13. And we took them all to Hawaii thinking, we didn't have a big wedding, but we thought the money we were going to spend, we're going to take our kids to Hawaii, make it a family wedding. And the youngest one, who's now 15 or so, she might have even been younger than that. She might have been like 4 or 5. Anyway, it was funny because she doesn't remember the wedding at all. And my husband's like, she doesn't remember the wedding? And then no, she doesn't remember the wedding. An assumption may be that everybody's going to remember it, or some area of it. It may not. They may not, for different reasons. Another assumption might be if you're hearing the words, they always do it this way. It never works out. They never say this and that. That would be assumptions that you're listening to. So now, before I wrap up this show, how do we stop negative assuming, and how do we take back our feelings from assumptions? Number 1, I've went over this. Identify the people in your life that don't feel so hot. Should be an easy list for you to make. Number 2, what are you assuming about them? Make a list. Be honest. Write out your assumptions. What do you assume about them before you even walk in the room with them? What's going on? Number 3, what are you feeling around them? What's going on within you? There's a really good thing we say in recovery, and this might be I always talk about what we share in recovery because it's such a powerful thing, learning to live again once the fog's been lifted. It's such a powerful thing, and there's so many great tools that we come back from. So I never want to claim that these are my tools. These are, everything I give has usually been researched, borrowed, taken, whatever. I just like applying it, and I like talking about it. But the one thing we say in recovery that really helps with assumptions is that principles over personalities. If we can stick to the principle of a person or the principle of a relationship and get past the personality that we're getting ourselves caught up with, we will usually feel better. We will usually feel better. Principles over personalities. You go to the meeting, it's not really going the way, but you're thinking the intention of everybody probably is to have a productive meeting. That would be the principle. So if I focus on the principle over the personality, I will likely feel better. And that's why I'm talking about this today, so that you feel better. Here's the other thing you can do with assumptions. This is another great piece of feedback. become extremely curious about the other person or situation. Become extremely curious about the other person or the other situation. This can work really well with adult children and their parents when they look back at their parents. And most of us, like if you come from my background, there was a lot of critical judgment of my parents. There was a lot of stuff that I, got through and worked through and all that. But when I became curious about what their life was like growing up, and I became curious about really almost trying to put myself in their shoes, I started to understand from a different perspective. A lot of those negative assumptions and negative emotions fell to the wayside. Yeah. So I wanted to become curious. When somebody is bugging you or they're really on your last nerve, is it possible to ask yourself, what if I was curious about them today? What are they going through? What was their evening like? What was their morning like? Maybe they were in a car accident. Maybe they have no money in the bank. Maybe a child is sick at home. But when I become curious, would that help with my assumptions about them? Here's another one. Could they be correct? When you're really in conflict, remember the negative assumptions become a problem because they cause conflicts in our life. But is there a possibility that they could be correct? Is there a possibility? And two more for you, and then I'm going to wrap up the show. How is their assumption affecting me? How can I change my perspective so I don't feel negative about them? How is this assumption affecting me? And how can I change my perspective so I don't feel negative about them? Somebody just the other day was commenting about an ongoing relationship, and it was just the same old. And I just looked at him and I said, what are you going to do differently? Instead of putting it on the other person or even putting it on the relationship as the same old, what are you going to do differently about the relationship? What have you decided to do differently? What have you decided to perceive differently? And then the last one is kind of going along, could they be correct? What else could be true? What else could be true? I'm done. That's going to be a wrap for tonight. So if you are looking for any type of coaching, if you're somebody who likes to, I have a client of mine who loves the words deep dive. If you are somebody who likes to deep dive and promise it won't be too deep, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available for coaching. I have a 12-step program, no pun intended, with recovery. It's 12 steps of emotional elevation that I take individuals through. Would be more than happy to walk you through with that. As a reminder, I've been mentoring and coaching individuals for, I think I'm pushing 20 years, hundreds of individuals. Love to work with other people, love to see the transformation. If that is something that you are up for, feel free to reach out to me through my website at susandenee.com. Other than that, happy, terrific Tuesday and have a fantastic evening. And I will see you next week. That's a wrap. You have been listening to Know You're Crazy.
Crazy.
And my name is Susan Denee. We are identifying, understanding, and treating your crazy one episode at a time. Tune in to transformationtalkradio.com. To connect with me or Growth Spurt Your Life, please visit susandenee.com. That's Susan Denee, DENEE.com.